Following a series of foiled terrorist attacks on Australian soil, the Turnbull Government have announced a number of counter-terrorism measures. From placing concrete bollards to reshuffling security agencies, the government appears to be making a concerted effort to make Australia a safer place. The burning question is the Turnbull Government doing enough to protect Australians from terrorism? Let's find out. In June 2017, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull addressed the House of Representatives less than 2 months after the Manchester bombing, London Bridge attack, and Brighton siege. He said, "My government's number one priority is to keep Australians safe. Reacting is not enough. We will, stay ahead of this threat." Less than a week later, the federal government announced Immigration Minister Peter Dutton would be placed at the head of a new super ministry, combining Australia's 5 largest security agencies into one consolidated body to combat the growing threat to Australia's national security. I spoke with terrorism experts at RMIT University, Dr. Binoy Kempmark and Dr. Robin Cameron, about whether they think this new super ministry will make Australians safer.
If you are a desperate government with a barely workable majority, of course in Parliament, you want to be seen to be doing something in terms of security, and one of those is to give the impression of doing so, being vigilant with something like a super ministry. I think it's fair to say that Peter Dutton is in a power struggle with everybody else. There's something, he has made it very clear that he's very interested in having more power in addition to what he has at the moment. And there's a lot to suggest that there is, and certainly when it comes to the Attorney General's portfolio, Brandis would stand to lose a lot. The Attorney General would essentially have a lot of its functions taken away to be incorporated into this super ministry.
It's a little worrying because what we're doing is, in a sense, extending the border inside Australia, which may not make immediate sense because the border by definition is the bit in between, but borders can be best understood as a process rather than a thing or a place. That is, it's managing who is inside and who is outside, or who should be inside or who should not be outside. I think what it's doing is blurring the lines between domestic policing and maintenance of order and how we maintain borders and how we deter and manage foreign threats.
Having a super ministry, I just do not see that as being necessary at all.
Combining all of Australia's security agencies into one body may not improve the nation's security in the foreseeable future, but the implementation of concrete barriers and bollards in the nation's cities is a far more visible and immediate reflection of the government's efforts. But will these small barriers change a much larger issue?
So they're primarily a superficial visual deterrent for potential attackers and provide perhaps some sense of public sense of safety, but the meaningful measures have to be implemented in a more thought out way into urban planning and security systems. So for instance, you could not have cars in the entire CBD, which would of course inconvenience people, but it would make a great deal more safety, right? It would improve security on multiple levels, not just around counter-terrorism, even just around pedestrians getting hit, cyclists getting hit, and car emissions that we all have to breathe as we live in the city, right? So if we were meaningful about trying to improve urban security and also urban quality of life, you could remove cars, but they're not going to. So I guess there are questions around how serious they are if you really wanted to push it.
Alongside the introduction of bollards and concrete barriers in Australian cities, the federal government also released a report in August 2017 titled Australia's Strategy for Protecting Crowded Places, which lists a series of criteria by which private businesses can assess and address their risk of a terrorist attack. The report explicitly states that the responsibility to protect these spaces falls on business owners. Dr. Kempmark sees the report as reactive and argues the government is trying to deflect any criticism that it's not doing enough to protect Australians.
I suppose one of the problems with it is that there's an element of reactiveness to it. It's not an overall plan that anticipates things so much as reacts to them. That's one of the problems I have with the report, but I suppose the other problem with it is just, again, can you really do much in light of some of these attacks. The reality of it is that if you have public spaces and you still want to have freedom of movement, you also have to make sacrifices. The reality of it is that, of course, businesses are not to know one way or the other, quite frankly, as to how much of a threat or where's the next attack coming from. But there is this sense that, and I think it's part of, again, a government strategy, which, and all governments would tend to do that, it's to always guard themselves, if you like, against criticism that they haven't done enough.
The Turnbull government's efforts to make Australia safer can't be refuted. Where it is that it's aiming this effort, however, is certainly in question. Founding director of the Global Terrorism Research Centre, Peter Lentini believes de-radicalisation and community engagement programs are the key to tackling Australia's terror threat head-on.
This is probably one of the strengths of urging social cohesion, is that individuals and groups are able to become part of something bigger, but by the same token, all of this contributes in one way, shape or form to a broader umbrella of security within that community. There's certainly no way in which terrorism is going to be completely eradicated. Okay? There is no one country that can eradicate terrorism. Therefore, I don't think there's one policy that can answer that. But I think social cohesion can play a significant role on a number of different levels. Because one of the things that with social cohesion and making people feel as if they're part of a community, when they see people who are going to be disruptive to that community, they act in order to protect that community.
Increased protections could curb the threat of terrorist attacks, but working with communities to address radicalisation and promote socially beneficial programs will, according to Dr. Robin Cameron, be vital in the Turnbull government's pursuit of a safer Australia.
We don't need more security measures. If anything, they're only going to inflame internal divisions within society. I think what they need to do is bring in more smarter, more community-oriented measures that aren't even explicitly labelled as counter-terrorism, that are just designed to try and allow communities to be who they are in a sense. But demanding people sort of pursue sort of national security goals in their daily lives, I don't think creates harmony and cohesion within society, and ultimately will be detrimental. So I think too many, if anything.
Thank you for watching The Burning Question. Unfortunately, a lot of content from this episode's interviews didn't make the final cut, so head on over to The Burning Question's Twitter and Facebook pages, where we'll be posting a series of short videos over the coming weeks, looking deeper into the issue of domestic terrorism in Australia, including cybersecurity, foreign conflicts, and migration. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.